From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. Tennessee General Assembly comes back to town not long after the new year of 2016 arrives, and that's just a few weeks from now. It already appears lawmakers will have a jam-packed agenda of issues to consider. Some will be new, many will be left over from last session. The man who sets much of the agenda for what's considered and what's not, at least in the upper chambers, is the Speaker of the Senate, Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey. Governor Ramsey, thanks as always for coming on the show.
Great to be here, Pat. Enjoy these shows.
Now, besides approving the annual state budget, which you're required to do by the Constitution, what else do you see as the absolute top priorities for this session?
Well, let's don't skip over the budget completely, because I'm going to tell you the problem here is I've been here and when times are good and when times are bad. And so, you know, usually when there's not enough money, it's relatively simple to balance the budget. You just tell everybody no.
Oh, this is not one of those years.
This is not one of those years. So
now you're going to have a fight about it.
Exactly. That's exactly the reason I didn't want to skip over that, because that may be the issue. There are years when the budget's relatively simple. You pass the budget because there's not enough money to go around and you go home. This is not going to be one of those years because the economy is growing well and we somewhat underestimated revenues on purpose. We try to be frugal, that we're going to have some extra revenues. And again, I've been with good times and not so good times, and when there's extra money, that's when the budget kind of becomes the issue during session.
There used to be a time in the past when the legislature sort of left that up to the governor to decide what the surplus would, where that would go if it wasn't already allocated in the budget. But those days are not these days.
They're not, but we get some input to begin with, so I like to think that takes care of part of it. But the old saying is that the governor proposes and the legislature disposes, and so you'll see some changes. I'm sure you will. It won't be a rubber stamp, but at the same time, again, when there's several $100 million more money than we expected, there's always pent-up demand in state government. Everybody has something they want done in their district, so it'll be an interesting fight over the budget before we move as we move through session. Of course, that'll be one of the last things we approve. But I think that could dominate session.
Been a lot of talk about needing to do things more on roads, a lot of resistance to raising the gas tax, particularly in a re-election year for many lawmakers. But this extra money could well be used to tide the state over, shall we say, until you get around to deciding exactly how you want to handle the gas tax or change it in years to come.
Exactly. If you'll remember a few years ago during the Bredesen administration, actually 3 or 4 years in a row, we took money out of the dedicated highway trust fund. So I do think this year you'll see some of that money going back in to at least tide us over till we do reach a solution. As I've said many times, we're not in a crisis yet on road funding, but at the same time, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look down the road just a few years and see we're going to hit crisis. So you're right, the extra money this year, Pat, could help us tide us over to that time.
A large pay raise last year for teachers and a pay raise for state workers. Do you expect something like that again from Governor Haslam, and are lawmakers disposed to want to do that?
I do think so. We're now getting into where we're into the performance pay for performance, to where for several years ago we set up some evaluation processes to where people aren't just paid a straight across the board pay raise, but you are rated by your bosses, etc. You have an evaluation system, so there'll be some people get more pay raises than others. That's the way the private sector worked. That's the way public sector should work. It hasn't in the past. So yes, you'll see money in the budget this year, probably a tidy sum of money this year for pay raises.
Another thing where there might be some disagreement about priorities, particularly about using the surplus, is what to do about the Hall income tax. I know you've been trying for several years to repeal it in its entirety. It's been changed and somewhat lessened over the last couple of years. Are you going to push this year for the complete repeal?
I won't go for the complete repeal, because we can't be like Washington, D.C. If they repeal a tax, they just increase their deficit, and we can't do that. We have to actually balance our budget. And now we are in good times. Should we take an extra step or two? Yes, a bigger step than we have in the past. But my goal is eventually, by slowly weaning this down, that we will get to at least where it doesn't affect those over the age 65. That's what I've always worried about.
Governor Haslam has been somewhat reluctant, particularly to do a complete repeal. Are you going to continue to be able to bring him along to be supportive of slowly getting rid of that tax?
I think we're working slowly, yes. A complete repeal, probably not. But at the same time, you know, as a conservative Republican, I like for people that have saved for their retirement, put money back, have their retirement fund. Yet here in the state of Tennessee, we say we don't have an income tax. Yet when you start drawing that money out, then you got to pay income tax on it in Tennessee. So those are the ones that I'm more worried about than anybody. I don't know we'll have a complete repeal, but at the same time, if we just take, instead of baby steps, take a little bigger step this year than we have in the past, I'll be satisfied.
A couple of areas where you've had some criticisms about things going on in state government I want to ask you about. You have indicated that you no longer have confidence in the state corrections commissioner. Governor Haslam several times when this commissioner has come under attack has backed him and indicated he wants to keep him. What do you see about this commissioner that you don't like that the governor seems to be okay with?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's not necessarily personnel. That's kind of the way government works in general. If you look back when Kevin Huffman was Commissioner of Education, came in and made drastic changes, but then after 4 or 5 years, it's time for a new Commissioner of Education. You could look at Department of General Services, where Steve Cates came in, changed what we're doing, the bull in a china shop, and then you bring somebody else in. I think that's where we are now with Commissioner Schofield, not necessarily doing such a bad job or anything, but it's now he'll be entering now his 6th year. Not uncommon at all in a governor's administration to change, and I do think that for the rank and file worker out there, they think it's time for a change, and there are other qualified people out there. But it's completely up to the governor. It's his appointment. But I do think Representative Prison in my district that would help morale if this happened.
Lieutenant Governor Ron Ramsey is our guest on Inside Politics. Back to continue our conversation with him after you watch this break.